Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn and journalist and author Christina Patterson. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the headline of the Sunday Telegraph, UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. A report on the Foreign Secretary's piece in the paper about the threat the conflict is causing to freedom of navigation. The risk to the economy posed by the crisis in the Red Sea is what The Observer is leading with. Their headline, Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. 100 days of hell. The Mirror's top story looks into the Middle East's grim milestone with a story about a premature baby clinging to life in a Gaza hospital. The Sunday Express is reporting on calls from MP Kevin Hollenrake to jail the post office chiefs who were behind the scandal that convicted innocent postmasters of fraud. The Sunday Times reports Theresa May's government knew about concerns over the Horizon IT system, but still pushed through a CBE for post office boss Paula Venables. The Mail on Sunday is leading on an exclusive with more details about the man involved in a revolt on a British Airways flight in November, who they report avoided deportation despite previous gun and drug convictions. And The Sun on Sunday has an exclusive on Lauren Goodman's former relationship with footballer Kyle Walker. The cold weather is the top story on The Star. The headline, brace yourself for the big freeze. See what they did there? And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And as I said, we're joined tonight by Andrew Eborn and Christina Patterson. Always wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming. OK, let's start with a grim front page and a grim milestone as well. Let's go to the Sunday Mirror. And it says Middle East's grim milestone, 100 days of hell, because Sunday marks, of course, the 100 days of the conflict. And, a picture there of a premature baby. And, of course, we have seen a huge loss of civilian, whatever the politics one might take behind it, a huge loss of civilian life. Christina, what did you make of the coverage? What do you make of the milestone?
Well, the milestone, the whole thing is just tragic. It's tragic from start to finish. And one of the many tragic aspects of this is we don't know how this will finish. Obviously, more than 23,000 Palestinians have been killed in this. The hostages, many of them still haven't been returned. Some of them have died. There seems to be no way out for this. And we know what's happening with South Africa and accusations of genocide, and we don't know what will happen there. But what is absolutely clear is that this is just a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that will have global implications for a very long time to come, because whatever Israel does and doesn't manage to succeed in doing in relation to Hamas, what is absolutely clear is that it certainly will not have killed the desire to obliterate Israel, which, unfortunately, one assumes that generations of terrorists will be born from this tragedy. So, in a way, there's almost nothing sensible to say about it. We just hope and pray that it will end.
Andrew?
Oh, and absolutely. And this is the problem. I think, in a way, we almost get desensitized to a lot of these things until you personify it by looking at this terrible tragedy. Power cuts, they're saying, about threatening the lives of the Gaza babies. This is probably the youngest victim, they say, in one of the last working medical facilities as a result of it. It's a horrible, grim milestone. And as you say, there's no end in sight. And this is the real problem.
I mean, you say desensitized, but actually we saw thousands and thousands of people out on the streets of London, Global Day of Protest. We're seeing these protests everywhere. And often it has to be said in conflicts, sometimes the attention of the public outside wanes, but here it doesn't seem to. I mean, you're still seeing people turn out. Yes,
I think you're right, and I think in particular many young people have been are extremely passionate about this. I think one of the tragedies of the situation, though, is that, who wouldn't be enraged by what is going on? It is absolutely right to be horrified by what happens in a war. And, of course, questions certainly should be asked of Israel and are being asked about the strategy it's taking. And even David Cameron said at a select committee this week that he thought that Israel might well have committed war crimes. So, it's completely understandable that people would be angry. But when people demonstrate about the situation there, what they don't say is what you are meant to do when an enemy embeds themselves among civilians and uses human shields.
I suppose that's why so many people are focusing on sort of some kind of plan for when the violence ends, which, you know, of course, hopefully will be soon. Now, let's go to the Telegraph, because, of course, one of the risks has always been, and one of the fears of the allies of Israel, is this escalating, becoming a regional conflict. So, front page of the Sunday Telegraph, UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. Andrew, what does he say exactly?
Well, basically saying they can defend their freedom of navigation, and the attacks on the Red Sea mean they have to go the very long way round to deliver, obviously, the oil and various other things as well, has a massive impact. And so this is, again, the language of war and the real concern about the escalation of that. And so that's what he's trying to do. He's sort of saying, well, there are people chanting on the streets, well, Yemen, make us proud. And it's the language of hate. And I think what's happened in the poison that there's been in social media is spilled out onto the streets. And we saw this, I think, within the 24 hours of October the 7th. And what was happening on that sort of situation is there were about 50 million posts on social media about the conflict. A lot of it, some of it artificially intelligent creation, a bit of fake news as well as the reality.
Yeah, Christina, before I go to you, let me just pull up the front page of The Observer. The Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. So, sorry, front page of The Observer, there it is. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on the Red Sea and you know, the freedom of navigation, because that could have impact. You know, obviously, this crisis is causing a lot of deaths, but there is an economic angle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not sure that people have really grasped the potential implications of this economically. There's talk that it could cause our GDP to shrink by 0.3%. And I've heard this week, as I'm sure many of us have, interviews with people who run businesses whose costs for shipping have quadrupled, quintupled, just become totally unaffordable. It means that our bills will yet again go up.
So in light of that, do you think that we're going to see, I don't know, the UK government, the US government maybe put even more pressure? Because they are obviously putting pressure on Israel behind the scenes. Do you think...
Absolutely. Well, I don't think I'm afraid I don't think the UK is in much position to put pressure on Israel, but I think Biden and Blinken will continue to, and we can only hope that somehow or other there will be some kind of de-escalation at some point. But what's not clear is the Houthis are saying this is all about Gaza. I mean, that they are attacking ships that are nothing to do with Israel or countries that support Israel. So I don't think their message is entirely coherent.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very complex region and everyone has lots of reasons, but certainly that what's happening in the Palestinian territories in Gaza is, I mean, certainly the Middle East is glued to the images that we're seeing come out of Gaza. So it is an incendiary situation, to say the least. Let's look at some domestic news now. Front page of the Times. So this is about that CBE that was given to the head of the post office. So Venel's given CBE despite Horizon fears. Honours Committee under May government ignored the warnings and pushed through with the award straight away.
It's one of the biggest scandals and miscarriages of justice. And I was with Michael Rodkin just a few hours ago. He was the sub-postmaster who was invited in to look at Horizon system and discovered all sorts of things where they could alter the figures and so on and so forth. But it's shocking news. And every time that we're unveiling more and more about what actually happened. So what they're saying here is the Honours Committee under May government ignored the warnings that the system was defective and still pushed through the CBE for Venels. And I think the general public, they're outraged about it. What's interesting, though, it took an ITV drama before that really came to light. And people have been dripping the story for a number of years on that sort of basis.
In fairness, I'll say this, that a lot of journalists did work on it. It sort of never captured the public imagination because obviously the drama was built from the journalism. Christina, again, before I come to you, let's look at the Sunday Express, which has a different angle on the same story. So, Minister, jail post office bullies. I mean, again, from no action for so long now, there's a lot of calls for action.
Well, that's right, there is. Everybody, as Andrew says, following the drama, everybody wants to be shown to be the person who was right while everybody else was wrong, and an awful lot of people were wrong. But I do think what's interesting about this, Kevin Hollingrake is the Post Office Minister, and he's saying that some of the corporate people should go to jail. And certainly from what we know, it looks as if some of them should go to jail. I mean, obviously, there would have to be court cases, but I think there should be prosecutions. But what was interesting to me about the Sunday Times story about the pushing ahead under the May government of the CBE for Paula Venables is that actually it looks as if the politicians were actively encouraging both Her Honour and the Post Office to override objections about the Horizon system. So, in fact, it's worse than we think, because in that story, somebody who is not named essentially suggests that Paula Venables was rewarded for going against her conscience because the government wanted to cut costs and they wanted the Post Office to keep costs low, i.e. not allow all these expensive claims to go ahead. So that is a pretty explosive allegation. And I do think politicians were not just complicit, but more malign than that.
OK. I have to leave it there for now. Christina, Andrew, stay with us. We'll have more from the front pages, including this in the Sunday Times. Their headline, Beijing doesn't scare us, says the new leader of Taiwan. Stay with us. Watching the press preview with me now are barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Thanks for being with us. OK, let's go to the front page of the Sunday Times. This time, let's focus on one of their main stories. Zelensky's plea to the West, help us now, for the sake of all of our futures. And this is, of course, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, I guess in a way reminding the West that there's a war still going on, that he is fighting. And I suppose he's a bit scared about election year, especially in the US. Christina, what did you make of what was said here?
Well, and it's another tragic situation, I'm afraid to say. I mean, Rishi Sunak has just been out there and given $2.5 billion to contribute to Zelensky's war effort. I don't think any of us would begrudge that, but it is strange how he can find money for war when he tells us there is no money for so many other things. But this is a fight against tyranny, really, because obviously Putin has invaded another country, and it is desperately bad luck for Zelensky that the Gaza situation has exploded in the way it has, because the eyes of the world are now on that rather than on Ukraine. And of course, the situation, as you said or suggested, in the US is pretty awful. Biden did not get the funding he wanted to give to Ukraine, which is enormously hindering Ukraine. And Ukraine will not win this war. I mean, it's a proxy war. It is sending its own people. It will not win it if it doesn't get the financial help from the West and the weapons. The Ukrainians are being incredibly brave, and many are dying and being injured and wounded and losing homes and livelihoods and so much else in the course of this war. But without Western support, it won't win.
And that's the real problem, isn't it? Because what does victory look like? He's talking about you've got to keep on going, keep on throwing more and more money at it. And as you rightly say, where is this $2.5 billion coming from? And I know they all sort of said they're going to be there till the very end, and they've all signed the flag. I think all the cabinet signed the flag as a sort of an interesting gesture. But when they're talking about victory, it's incredibly difficult to look at that in reality.
Sure, but I suppose it could be victory as in the West standing together behind Ukraine and sending that message to Putin. I mean, maybe some Ukrainian territory will eventually just become Russian, depending on how much. But I guess that would be victory, certainly for Zelensky, but potentially for the European.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that's what we need to look at, is what does a victory look like? Because winning the war, I think, is an ambition which I think is probably too difficult to achieve. I think trying to get people to the negotiating table to say, OK, let's work out how we stop this would be a more realistic approach.
Yeah. OK, let's go again to another domestic story, which is the Express, page 2. Pupils can't learn to read on screen. Thousands of children would be left unable to write and spell if schools do not cut down on routine screen use in lessons. Christina, what do you think of this?
Yeah, well, this doesn't seem to be an incredibly explosively new finding. An education expert who's presumably sent a press release to the Sunday Express is being quoted for her views on pupils using screens and how that might hinder their literacy and exam skills. And I think there is nobody on this planet who would deny that that might be the case. But, you know, on the other hand, what you gain in terms of incredible skills for young, you know, very small children on, you know, maybe they won't use handwriting in the way that we did. Skills change over time.
I confess my handwriting is terrible.
Mine is as well. Mine is terrible.
I only notice when I'm writing Christmas cards.
I know, exactly.
And it's true, use it or lose it is what they say.
Wow.
And you work on that basis. And I think the problem is that if you're doing things on screen, and they've also announced that next year they're going to start doing GCSEs on screen, so you won't necessarily need to do that for certain pupils and so on and so forth. But if you have instant spelling checks and so on and so forth, you're going to have issues there.
I have to say, though, my little boy uses a screen for spelling, and actually that's quite useful because it gives him, you know, it tells him if it's the wrong answer. So, but yes, certainly for writing, it hasn't helped any of us, has it?
Oracy, I think, is the skill that they're going to bring in for people. And because with AI basically enabling people to do first drafts of virtually anything, the way to really test people is to say, OK, stand up in front of the class and talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
How's your son on that front?
He's very little.
Very little.
He's only 7, so I think, you know, we have time. Let's go to the Mail on the Sunday, front page. And the beautiful picture of the Queen and, well, then Prince Charles, but obviously King Charles now. A royal exclusive, secret summits over making Charles regent in Queen's last years. And it's about these revelations from this book that, you know, some revelations have come out already, especially about the Queen's final moments, which we're told peaceful.
Well, I was very pleased. I mean, you know, death is no picnic. And, you know, many of us have lost family members in situations that have not been entirely peaceful. So I'm very pleased to hear that the Queen died peacefully in her sleep. And it's very touching also to hear that she was doing her red boxes really right up to when she died. She was an incredibly diligent person.
Andrew, we've got 30 seconds, but I know you've got stuff to say.
Well, I think the poor old Charles saying that he was out picking mushrooms, what a fun guy. I think you work on that sort of basis. I feel a bit sad for him that was the revelation, because he was at his mother's side right to the end. I think it felt a bit intrusive from my point of view.
True, I can see that. Andrew, Christina, for now, thank you.